They called her a sweet old lady. With her silver curls, wire-rimmed glasses, and floral print dresses, Dorothea Puente looked like someone's kindly grandmother. She baked cookies, tended her rose garden, and ran a quiet boarding house in Sacramento, California, for the elderly, the sick, and the mentally disabled. Her home at 1426 F Street was a second chance for many, a place where society's forgotten souls found a roof, a warm meal, and a little dignity. But beneath the surface, something far more sinister was festering. That quiet white Victorian house, lined with lace curtains and surrounded by blooming flowers, held a dark secret. A secret buried just 6 feet under. Dorothea Helen Gray was born on January 9, 1929, in Redlands, California. Her childhood was a nightmare. Her father was an abusive alcoholic who died of tuberculosis when she was just 8. Her mother, a sex worker, died shortly after in a motorcycle accident. By the age of 10, Dorothea was an orphan. Shuffled between foster homes, she suffered abuse, neglect, and emotional trauma. From a young age, she learned how to manipulate people to survive. She lied often. She created stories about herself. She'd claim to be a doctor, a widow of a wealthy man, or even a former beauty queen. Her life became a web of shifting identities. As an adult, she married multiple times, often to men much older than her, and each relationship ended in disaster. By the 1960s, she was living in Sacramento and had already been arrested several times for check fraud, perjury, and operating a brothel under the guise of a care home. In 1961, she was convicted of running a house of ill repute. But prison didn't reform her. Instead, she learned to become more careful, more convincing, more dangerous. By the early 1980s, Dorothea was once again posing as a respectable woman. She was in her 50s, presenting herself as a widow running a clean, safe boarding house for the vulnerable. The house at 1426 F Street became her base of operations. She welcomed elderly men and women, the mentally ill, alcoholics, and physically disabled adults, people with no family, no voice, and no one to fight for them. She gave them warm meals, a bed, and kind words. But to Dorothea, they weren't tenants. They were income streams. She made a deal with a social worker named Judy Moise, who worked with vulnerable adults in the city. Judy trusted Dorothea and sent several of her clients there. In return, Dorothea appeared to care for them. She took their medications, cooked for them, and made sure their social security checks were delivered directly to her. But behind closed doors, something terrible was happening. Tenants began to disappear. Not all at once, slowly, over time. A man would suddenly be gone, and Dorothea would offer a calm explanation. He reunited with family, she would say. She went to live with her niece. Or, he checked into a hospital. Her answers were always gentle, always plausible, and always just out of reach of verification. In 1982, Ruth Monroe moved into the house. She was a 61-year-old woman, recently widowed, and hoping for companionship. Within a week, she was dead. Dorothea claimed she'd overdosed on Tylenol and codeine out of grief. The death was ruled accidental. That same year, another man, Malcolm McKenzie, accused Dorothea of drugging and robbing him. She was arrested and convicted. But while in prison, she charmed everyone around her. She played the victim, talked about her tragic childhood, and promised to change. When she was released in 1985, her parole conditions forbade her from running a boarding house or caring for the elderly. But Dorothea ignored those rules entirely. She forged documents and restarted the operation. The house once again began filling with vulnerable people, and the pattern of disappearances continued. She was meticulous. She kept records, forged signatures, and told neighbors that the people who vanished had simply moved on. Sometimes, she buried them immediately. Other times, she let the smell linger, masking it with bleach, air fresheners, and fresh soil in the garden. For a while, it worked. No one asked questions. No one wanted to believe the gentle old lady with the sweet smile was capable of such horror. But in 1988, one person did begin to question her. Alvaro Montoya, known as Bert, was a 51-year-old man with schizophrenia and developmental disabilities. He couldn't read or write and was extremely dependent on routine. He was one of Judy Moise's clients. When Judy placed him in Dorothea's home, she believed it was the safest place available. But weeks passed, and Bert hadn't contacted her. He never missed a scheduled visit before. When Judy asked Dorothea where Bert was, she received strange answers. First, Dorothea said he had gone to Mexico. Then she said he was visiting his brother. Later, she claimed he had checked into a hospital. None of it made sense. Eventually, Dorothea handed her a handwritten letter, supposedly from Bert, saying he was fine. But Bert could barely write his name. The letter was clearly forged. Judy's alarm bells went off. She contacted the police. On November 11, 1988, officers arrived at the house on F Street to conduct a welfare check. Dorothea welcomed them warmly. She was polite, calm, and cooperative. She offered them coffee. She showed them around the house. It was clean, too clean. Empty rooms. No personal items. Just rows of beds and the overwhelming scent of disinfectant. The officers stepped into the backyard and noticed something strange. The soil looked recently disturbed. There were soft mounds and patches of loose dirt. It looked like someone had been digging. They brought in shovels. As they dug into the garden, the horror began to unfold. The first body was unearthed, decomposed, wrapped in plastic. Dorothea gasped. "Oh dear," she said softly. "I had no idea." But investigators weren't fooled. They kept digging. A second body was found. Then a third. The yard had become a graveyard. Still, Dorothea remained composed. She offered an explanation for everything. She insisted she knew nothing about the bodies. She even asked to go to a nearby hotel for a cup of coffee while the police continued their work. Unbelievably, they let her go. It was a critical mistake. She didn't come back. Dorothea Puente disappeared. She boarded a taxi, fled Sacramento, and eventually made her way to Los Angeles. There, she checked into a hotel under a fake name, Donna. She went to bars, met strangers, and continued her game. She even told a man she met that she was a recent widow looking for a fresh start. But her face was on every TV screen in the country. Her story was front-page news. The death house landlady was on the run. The man she met saw her face on the news and called the police. She was arrested without incident. Calm, smiling, just like always. Meanwhile, back in Sacramento, police continued to search the property. The final body count reached 7. Each body was wrapped in fabric or plastic, some with air fresheners buried nearby to mask the smell. Most of the victims had high levels of sedatives in their systems, particularly a powerful drug used to treat insomnia. Forensic scientists concluded that the levels were far beyond anything therapeutic. These people had been poisoned. The victims included Leona Carpenter, 78, one of Dorothea's earliest known victims. Dorothy Miller, 64, a developmentally disabled woman. Benjamin Fink, 55, a disabled man. James Gallup, 62, a military veteran and stroke survivor. Vera Faye Martin, 64. Betty Palmer, 78, whose body was found decapitated, her hands and feet removed to prevent identification. And of course, Alvaro Bert Montoya, whose disappearance had finally unraveled the entire scheme. Authorities believe there could have been up to 15 victims, maybe more. Some tenants had disappeared without a trace and were never found. But the evidence wasn't strong enough to prove additional murders beyond the bodies found. The trial began in 1992. It became one of the longest and most expensive trials in California history at the time. The prosecution portrayed Dorothea as a cold, calculating killer who targeted the weak, the voiceless, and the forgotten. They called her a predator hiding behind a grandmother's smile. The defense tried to humanize her. They pointed to her tragic past, her mental health struggles, and insisted that the deaths were either accidental or caused by overdoses. The jury deliberated for more than a month. In the end, they convicted her of 3 murders, those with the strongest forensic evidence, and sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They deadlocked on the other 6. Dorothea was sent to Central California Women's Facility, where she lived quietly for the rest of her life. In interviews, she maintained her innocence. "I didn't kill anyone," she told reporters. "I made mistakes, but I didn't kill." No one believed her. She died in prison on March 27, 2011, at the age of 82. Her death certificate listed natural causes. Today, the house at 1426 F Street still stands. Over the years, it's been renovated and repainted. Some say it feels cold inside. Others say they hear things, whispers, footsteps, the sound of digging. Whether haunted or not, the house carries a dark legacy. Dorothea Puente fooled everyone. Her neighbors, her tenants, the police, and even social workers. She wore a mask of kindness and respectability. But behind it was a woman who saw the elderly and disabled not as human beings, but as easy money. Her crimes shocked the nation not just because of their cruelty, but because of the person who committed them, a sweet-looking woman who appeared to be incapable of harm. They called her the Death House Landlady. And behind that title lies one of the most chilling stories in true crime history. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for more real-life crime stories. Thanks for watching.